Hey, welcome back to the Road to Recovery podcast. It's me, Ryan, here as always with my friend Tommy, who's got the crazy background going on. We got the retro 80s thing, the retro 80s vibe. Does it move or does it stay static?
It's supposed to be one of these synthwave moving backgrounds, but it's not particularly doing that actually. So
we'll get it working by next episode.
We'll get it working.
But I have a real treat for you guys today because we're joined today by Melissa Bernstein. Let me know if I ever butcher your name. I do it all the time with people. But someone who's not only dealt with eating disorders and exercise addiction, but kind of come full circle in her own healing journey and founders continuing to find, because it's kind of a never-ending path that we're on, to this mind-body balance. And that's something that I've been trying to do myself lately, and I've been promoting on our podcast Instagram, which you can find probably in the description, because I think that's almost more important than tackling the pure physical aspects of health. So Melissa, please tell us a bit more about your journey with fitness through your eating disorder and how we've gotten to where you are now, having written, I believe, a book. And I actually have the name for that. I'll name drop it right now. It is, Seek Lifelines. And I want to check it out because I've been on this reading binge. So I need some more stuff. So Melissa, please tell us more about yourself and kind of how you've gotten to where you are now.
Sure. Hi, Ryan and Tommy. Thank you so much for having me. So, gosh, my journey started probably the day I was born, in the fact that I've been afflicted with something called existential depression from the moment I can remember. And that is really a sense of deep meaninglessness about life, and a deep question surrounding why am I here and what am I meant to do when I'm here? And that terror as a child, was so great, and the feeling of hopelessness so deep, that from the very beginning, I turned to whatever I could to control the despair. So controlling behaviors started from the earliest time I can remember. And the first way I controlled it was through writing music and writing words, because the idea of something ordered from something so chaotic really, I think, was the only way I found any source of solace. So these rhyming verses and these songs would come into my head fully finished from the time I was really young. And my book, Lifelines, is the first compilation of all these verses and journal writings and photos into one cohesive product for the very first time. So I think the idea of controlling things that you can control to bring order to the orderlessness is something that I have done since my earliest memories.
I think you put it pretty eloquently, as far as, and this kind of, it actually made me wonder. I was like, man, have I dealt with existential depression myself? I just never had a word to put with the feeling, because I too have, from at least a decently young age, have always been kind of obsessed with this idea of purpose and meaning. And I know we all go through that to an extent, and some find purpose through religion and different or work, as my business partner does. Not Tommy, different guy. But I think it's a question that we all face. And also there's this other component of feeling out of control. And so it's really kind of beautiful that in a way you found, at least early on, in some ways, a way to channel that chaotic energy into a focused pattern. And I was very similar. And I find that with video creation is kind of my channel focus for that, at least right now. It's changed, but it also can manifest in terrible ways. And I think that's where you can kind of go to next with your story, as far as how that evolved and changed and maybe developed some bad patterns of control.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately you need some control, right? You need, what I call lifelines, because lifelines were not only the verses that I used to find meaning and a sense of control, but you also need to not over control, because if you control too much, you destroy yourself and you end up punishing yourself in a very deep, dark, not good way. And I think that's what happened to me. Obviously, I've now learned, I think, what to control, what I can control, what I can't control, and not to over control either. It's been a long road, I would say. And from the creating the verses, I think that turned into needing more validation laden things to control and to make me feel better about myself. And that's when it started taking the negative turn. I would say, the writing the verses and the creativity was all innate. Like, I didn't even know I was doing that. It was just my own body was so terrified that just came naturally out of me. But once I was more aware, I started turning to performance as something that I needed to control. Not only external performance in how I did in school, which became almost the thing that destroyed me, but also my physical performance too, and how I would act, how I looked, what I said. And I had this, unfortunately, image in my mind that was perfection. Basically, my bar was 100% perfect. There was no falling short. 100% was acceptable, 99% was failure in everything, in how I looked, in how I acted, in my emotions. I only had one emotion, which was perfect. And people who have a perfectionism affliction, as well as every other one you can imagine, they don't allow themselves to feel. They stifle everything they're feeling other than this sense that I'm great, everything's great, I look great, I feel great, I perform great. And that pressure ultimately for me became too much to bear.
No, I think that's something that not only me and Tommy can relate to, but probably most of our listeners, because that's, at least for myself, this is something Tommy always tells me, is to kind of let go of perfectionism. And it's really, I think what's really fascinating to me is just how far, when you do have that perfectionist mentality and OCD, for instance, and other types of things going on in your brain, how far you will push yourself into agony to maintain any level of that perfection or pursuit of perfection.
Absolutely.
It's insane.
And here's the key. This is where it got really dangerous, is when I didn't achieve it, there was this demon inside me that I couldn't even control that wanted to punish me for not achieving it. So when I fell short, I punished myself in every imaginable way. And that's where the addictions started to take control. And for me, it wasn't, excessiveness. It was a dearth. It was withholding. And basically, I say that I had complete pleasure anorexia. It wasn't just that I withheld food, although that I absolutely did. It was anything that brought me pleasure, because I despise myself for not being perfect. I despise myself for all the qualities that made me creative, which were really weird. I grew up feeling that I would never fit in, and that I was really weird, and that I didn't belong to anyone or anything. I never felt I fit in with anything, my own family, the society in which I lived. Like, I always felt something was wrong with me. And instead of seeing my uniqueness as something to be heralded and something that made me able to create at whim, I saw it as something that separated me from everyone else and something to be destroyed. And once I didn't achieve this so-called perfection, I wanted to hurt myself in every way. And, as an eating disorder is really killing yourself just slowly.
It's a slow suicide, really. That's the way I put it down to.
It really is. It's even worse in a way than actually just doing it and being done with it, because, all you want to do is simply eat. And that demon inside me was like, not only are you not going to eat, you're not going to do anything that brings you joy, and you're going to suffer. So the fear of failing became overwhelming, because I knew the corollary of what happened once I failed. It was like I wasn't going to be allowed to eat for days, or I was going to have to run 20 miles and, not stop until midnight. It was just, again, that sense of some force you can't control taking over your body.
I can really relate to that, because my eating disorder actually started with the loss of my mum in 1997. She had suffered cancer in the womb, and then she died when I was 17. And I was a semi-professional footballer at the time. And much like you said, I became obsessed about being this perfectionist, and I was always pushing myself to do more. And that's how the eating disorder actually manifested itself. It was partly grief, but I was actually hurting myself through trying to control things, because the rest of my life was out of control. And I was doing like 15 hours exercise a day. I had to be the best footballer. Then it actually caused me to have a fatal heart attack, and I was in a coma as well for 3 months. So shows you how fatal it can actually get.
Wow, that's crazy. Well, I know 20% of anorexic victims suffer heart attacks. It's like one of the highest mortality rates of any.
Exactly, yeah. And Toppy obviously taking their own life, sadly. That's another one.
Exactly. Wow.
But I think what's really, and I won't even bother anyone with my sob story, because I feel like I mention it every episode.
I want to hear it though.
It's similar to Tommy's as far as exercise addiction and like working out all the time. Mine actually came, it was a long time coming from a very stressful move when I was entering high school. I had lost basically all my friends. I moved to a strange land that we call Utah, and I didn't feel like I fit in here. So I kind of became a recluse. And when things started getting better, I actually had a girlfriend at the time. Things were going great. And then I went through a really bad breakup, and I felt again kind of at this loss of control, because I didn't have a stable friend group. I didn't have a significant other. I had my family, but I didn't really feel, I felt kind of detached from that. And I didn't want to bother them with my own thoughts, I suppose. And so mine manifested in also this perfectionist mentality of like, I'm going to take control of what I can, which is my fitness. Mm-hmm. And my goal was actually to achieve like better fitness. I'd always been active, but I wanted to bulk up a little bit. And for some reason, I thought not eating and working out a lot equaled bulking up in my head, which it doesn't. It's really interesting in retrospect when you have a different perspective years later, looking back at some of the behaviors and just realizing how illogical it all is. But in the moment, even now, and this is what I found really interesting about what you were just saying, is it's this self-punishment, and it's this constant negative talk to yourself. I just went through some health coaching last week, where even now I still refer to myself as being broken all the time. And what my health coach advisor basically told me was that you're not broken. And she's totally right. It's all in here. I have physical broken things, but it's all in here for the most part. And so what I'd really kind of like to ask you, and kind of take this conversation a more positive direction, is when did you start realizing that these behaviors were only negatively impacting not only your self-worth, but your being as well? And what actions did you take to start moving forward? And like everyone knows with these types of things, it's not often a linear line to being okay. It's very up and down. It's like a meandering river. So
exactly. You know, I wanted to just touch on one thing before that I think may be a commonality among a lot of folks who take control over their lives is my first eating disorder started when I was 11 and I had just moved. I had just moved from Pennsylvania to Colorado, and similar to you, I left all my friends behind. I went to an entirely new place because when you go from East Coast to West Coast, like it's so different. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, everyone here is so beautiful. They're such great athletes. Like they're so, I don't know what the word is, chill. And I was so heady and churning and introverted. And all I wanted to do was fit in. And that's when I felt that I wouldn't. And that was the first time I started thinking, maybe if I lose weight, even though I was like always the thinnest rail, but I thought maybe losing weight will make me fit in and make them accept me. So that's funny. That was like the very first time too. And like any addiction, it just keeps rearing its head once it starts taking hold of you. So I think, you know, the funny thing is, as you said, I never really realized I had any of these things. It was a demon that just took over me. I mean, I wasn't like looking on the outside saying, wow, you're getting really thin, Melissa. But I was studying abroad in Japan in college. And one night, I believe I was having a heart attack. I was exercising so much. I wasn't eating. When I stopped moving, my hands and legs would shake. Like I'd have, you know, involuntarily to the point where it looked like I was having a seizure. I'd have to hold my knee down. And one night I was sleeping and I woke up like with this, you know, sort of aghast, and my heart, I had this pain so great in my heart. And I was like palpitating. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're having, like, for some reason I knew I was having a heart attack. So I kept this stash of food in my room. And I had like bananas that I would hoarded because I would hoard food just to look at it, even though I wouldn't.
Yeah, I did that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's like you're denying yourself. So I just grabbed like 2 or 3 bananas, and I remember just shoving them into my mouth, knowing I needed that. And, you know, gradually, it took like an hour, everything started calming down, and I was able to go back to sleep and didn't have that heart attack. But that was maybe the first time that somewhere inside I was like, this is not good. Like, you are doing something bad. And when I came back from that trip and I was 19, I met Doug for the first time. And although we never talked about it, he said when he saw me, I weighed 82 pounds when I came back from Japan, and hadn't had my, you know, normal cycles for years. Like, you know, everything was a wreck. And he said when he saw me, he thought I looked like he couldn't even imagine that someone would look that way. And he just started making me eat. Like, we didn't talk about it. There was no, but he would take me to these meals and he would be like, you're having dessert. And inside I was like, what do you mean I can't have dessert? I haven't had dessert in like 3 years. I'm not eating dessert. But because I didn't want to show him anything was wrong, I would, you know, eat dessert. Yeah. But then of course, when I went home, I would not eat at all. But I was starting to spend more and more time with him and gradually starting to gain weight. And as you know, when you go below a certain body weight, that's when the chemicals start to rage out of control without you even knowing. So I guess once I started going above that body weight, which started happening gradually, you know, even though I didn't want it to, I kind of knew that I was starting to feel better. And suddenly I wasn't so anxious, and I was starting to, and it was kind of like sort of, you know, not really realizing it, but connecting, like, I'm feeling better. I'm happier. Like, that demon isn't talking as loudly in my ear. And it just started going away. Not the feelings, but just I was being forced to eat, which ended up really helping me. And then Doug and I started our toy company really shortly after that, maybe a couple years after that, you know, Melissa and Doug. And that's when I experienced breathing, I think, for the very first time, because although I had created my whole life, ever since I can remember, it was always really dark, despairing things out of darkness. So I like to say, I could only create darkness out of darkness. And what, all of us are seeking more than anything is connection and to be accepted as our true selves. So because I was, only creating darkness, I was never showing it to anyone because it was so ugly and despairing in my mind and dark. Like I never found that connection I needed, which led to even a deeper existential despair, because if you don't have connection, you really don't feel life has meaning, because like you don't feel at one with anyone or anything. You feel utterly isolated and alone. But the minute we started making toys and I realized like, oh my gosh, I am actually able to take this darkness and channel it into something light and bright and happy and so ironic that could make a child like laugh, showed me something really powerful in terms of control. And it was on this existential journey, it showed me what existentialists feel, which is that we alone have actually the control within to choose how we act, and that I could choose to either create darkness out of darkness or light out of darkness. And the toys were pure light. So that was a profound change, because I now realized I could turn off the dark into dark faucet and on my own channel it all into radiant, jubilant light. So I wrote a verse about it at the time that became my mantra. And it was, step on out of the head, moving into the heart, free to channel the dread into jubilant art. And that really became my mantra, because I knew, even though I wasn't, again, hadn't done the work, I didn't understand still, I knew my head was a prison. It was a path to nothing. It was such torment and such terror. And I knew my heart, like all my heart wanted was to create beautiful things that made people happy and could impact someone in some small way. So it was like, if I could move out of here, move out of here, my head, move into my heart, and then channel all that ugliness into jubilant art, not dark art, jubilant art, then I would be okay. So that was the first dot, I would say.
I think that's actually really amazing, and it's something. It's funny early on when you started talking about your journey back. I found myself relating, and what I think is interesting, and this is kind of what I'd like to ask you next based on that, is for me personally, when I was at my lowest weight, I think my lowest was like 87, 88 pounds. And I never actually like was, I never was sent anywhere. I never really sought therapy or anything either. I kind of discovered these other things as you did along the way, looking back, which in a way sometimes has its own merit of, I kind of wish I knew it sooner, but it's fine. But for me, what was really difficult, or not really difficult, was I knew I had anorexia at some point, just purely based on a weight scale. I still thought I knew everything and my brain was fine and I was doing all these things. But even when I got back up to like a decent weight, I remained in this quasi recovery stage, of which I'm still like actively getting out of, which is not like critically dangerous. Like you're not probably going to have a heart attack at any time. You're not probably going to get crazy osteoporosis really quickly. But I was still actually, and it was funny because looking back, I did a video on this on my own channel where my friend interviewed me, and I was like, this is how I improved my mental state over anorexia. And now I'm back and I'm fit and all this stuff. And I watched that and I was like, that is a liar right there. He's lying about everything, including his weight in that video.
Well, we all do that. That's the thing, though. You know what I mean? But it's a number that's comfortable for us to be looked after in the community, but not really recovered. You see what I'm saying? It's because that's what the eating disorder is all about. It's about numbers and it's rules and regulations.
Right. But I'll get my story over really quickly. But basically, I was in this quasi-recovery state up until, well, I still kind of am. I'm still getting out of it, but I'm making headway, which is great. And I'm much more cognizant of all the thoughts. I can easily call them out now, whereas it was difficult. I always thought it was myself speaking when it was really, as you mentioned, this demon that's trying to always pull you down. Yeah. But about a year and a half ago, I started having nerve issues. And what really hit me was when you talked about after exercising, like your body shaking, like you were having a seizure. And I had the exact same thing happen. I got off like the elliptical or something, and my whole legs just like started like spazzing out, and it was crazy. So for me, like you had that wake up call kind of then. This a year and a half ago was my wake up call to like, holy crap, I'm like in trouble. Like I think it's really unfortunate because I see this all the time in like recovery groups and stuff and other places where it's unfortunate that too many times in life, whether it's a heart attack or losing a family member that you weren't in contact with and you wish you had been, that it takes a really dark event to make you realize just how bad things are and how much action you could have taken. But the key is that you do take action, which you did. And so that's what is truly important above all of that. And so kind of what I was going to ask you was how, or what are some ideas that you can put out there to anyone watching that is possibly in either this quasi state or at the very depths of all of this, to kind of not only start that first step moving forward, but come to terms that what they have done at this point kind of doesn't matter because it's in the past. And to keep focusing on solely that, which I did and so many other people do, is only going to kind of make it worse because it keeps you in the past. It doesn't move you forward.
That was so beautiful. I love that. Yeah, I mean, I think, again, talking about the surface things you need to do to stay alive, which stay up here in the head because they're numbers and they're metrics and they're right, getting to certain levels, and the real work, the hard work, the only work that really matters, which is in your heart. And that was the most terrifying, difficult journey of my life. And I only started doing that about 4 or 5 years ago. So, I knew I wanted to live and that I needed to eat in a certain manner to stay alive. And I think at one point I said to myself, you can't over-exercise and you can't not eat because you will die. Like, it was very clear to me in that night in Japan alone that I was like this close to having a heart attack. So I knew, and I wanted to live somewhere in me, even though I had punished myself my whole life. Like, I was curious enough to want to see what this journey had in store. So at many points in my life, I've said the 3 words, I choose life. And I think when you say those words, I choose life, it means you can't just say it, because you can't choose life and then not eat, because then you're not choosing life. You're choosing, death, ultimately. So once I said it with regard to my eating and my exercising, I knew 2 things. One was I had to eat 3 meals a day. I can still control, because believe me, I'm still the most controlled eater you can imagine. But I eat to fill my body and to make me happy. And I eat enough. And when I'm shaking because I'm still hungry, which I still do, I eat more, like immediately. I don't allow myself to be hungry. And I always try to feel satiated. And I knew that I can only exercise for an hour a day because I'm so addicted still that if I start, and even in this pandemic at the beginning, I started doing more and I feel that demon. Like, the minute anything gets past a level and it starts triggering me, I immediately spiral. I could see myself, like in my mind, I could see myself like not stopping walking the entire day because the chemicals are good. They're like endorphins, and it makes me feel really like high. It's like, whoa, I am. And I sense, I know what can happen because I'm an addict, or, I don't know what you call it. Not an the opposite. I'm a controller. So I'm a denier, I guess you'd say. So I have to pull back, and I have to say, as much as I want to, like in me is like, do it more, do it more, do it more. I have to say, I can't. Like if I go beyond maybe 2 hours a day, it's going to go into a really unhealthy thing. So I started to do that, and that was still outside, but it was like the two things I needed to stay alive, right? I'm going to eat because I want to live, and I'm going to not over-exercise because I want to live. And then the rubber met the road when I said, I have to do the work now. And that took almost my whole life until I had the courage to say, like, the only way you're going to really change anything in your heart is to go in there and really unearth sort of those feelings, those deep, dark feelings that made you do this in the first place. That sense of powerlessness toward life, toward our ephemerality, which, I'm like, and as an existentialist, I am always conscious of our mortality. And that's like the thing that really unsettles me. But you're going to have to go there, and you're going to have to touch it. And finally, you're going to have to accept it. And you're going to have to accept that you are not perfect. You are not just one emotion. You are not your image of ideal, but that's all you got. And that's who you are. And until you can truly accept yourself in every single thing you are, you will never be able to move forward. So I went on this journey, which we have now, it was so profound, and I'm still on it. I don't think I'll ever be finished the journey, but I've taken it once, and now I'm taking it again and again and again. And it became so life-changing and so deep and profound that I wrote it for our Lifelines community. And they will also be able to take this same journey on our ecosystem, when we go live in the near future.
I think that's really cool that you are doing that. And that's actually one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, so we could talk about that in a second, because I think anything, there's just for people that struggle not only with anorexia. I use eating disorders as kind of a base to describe a lot of different poor mental states that can manifest in different problems. Yeah. This is just the one that I personally relate to, and it's easiest for me to explain or use as analogy. But so many people struggle with some level of, whether it's just anxiety or mental health in general, and it's now being talked about more. Which is
during COVID, certainly it's been talked about a lot more, and I would say that's the one benefit. Probably it's kind of raised awareness about the kind of mental health side of things as well.
Yeah, exactly. But it's still something that I feel like needs so much push just in the general medical community, because I felt often I was asking my mom last night because we were discussing all this kind of eating disorder stuff. I was kind of getting ramped up for the podcast, and I was like, did we ever like actually talk to my doctor about anorexia at all? And I don't think we ever did. And it was obvious from just a physical standpoint that I had a problem, but nothing actually happened. Like nothing was suggested, nothing. And so I think that's the real sad part, is that there's just this large segment of the population that either doesn't understand or doesn't know how to handle certain things. And sadly, some portion of that is within our very own medical community, which is supposed to help take care of us.
It's because there's quite a stigma around males with eating disorders. I think that's what it is. Doctors are more cognizant of females having eating disorders, whereas if it's a male, they'll kind of turn you away because they don't really recognize it in those kind of stages, because fitness is socially acceptable. So if you're pushing yourself to the max as a male, it's quite acceptable. So they don't really recognize it until it's too late.
Yeah, and this is what. So when you were doing your interview with Jeff Cavalier from Athlete X, I thought it was really kind of beautiful that he, as someone in the fitness community, really big, like super jacked dude, is talking about how just this doesn't complete you. There's this whole other aspect. So maybe you can kind of talk about, or no, what were you gonna say?
I was going to say, I think we also need to broaden the conversation because, anorexia or bulimia or whatever is just a symptom of a control disorder.
Yep.
Totally.
Yep.
And, I controlled a lot more than just my eating. I mean, I controlled my money, my spending. I was like the most.
I can relate to that as well.
I mean, anything I could control, I controlled. I controlled my performance. I controlled my looks. I controlled my eating. I controlled my exercise. Like anorexia was just one small, it was probably the most deadly of those behaviors because you're probably not going to die from not spending, although you might if you don't buy food. But like we all have our different manifestations of that feeling of powerlessness. And I think if we talked about that more generally, these are just the symptoms. So like you said, you could say to someone, you have to eat so much and get your weight up, but you're keeping yourself alive and you're alleviating the symptom, but you're not dealing with the issue at all. Like, and that's the point is, until you deal with the issue, these things will keep arising again and again and again. It's just a Band-Aid over. And once you're in another, because I even know with myself, whenever I feel powerless, I start to want to control my food. It's like an immediate, or control everything. It's all the lump. And it arises out of the feelings that we don't allow ourselves to feel.
That's absolutely true. That's something I've actually spoken about a lot in the podcast because I've been through treatment quite a lot in the past myself, and I always found that you were basically just getting into hospital to put on weight and they weren't dealing with the internal issues that was causing eating disorder. Then you were sent back out into the community with the same problems that you had when you were into the hospital, but just at a higher weight. And then it was just like a hamster wheel, basically. You were just going round and round and round.
Yeah. I mean, it's really fascinating because I look at myself in the mirror and I just think about kind of more so the fact that nobody really knows what's going on in my head but me. Like no one has any idea. And sometimes I don't even know because I'm oblivious to what my mind is making me do because it's just taken that much control over me. And so like you said, though, the first step in any of this is really having, you used a better word, but it's a willingness to want to be better. If you don't have that.
I choose life. Like, I choose life. I think at some point it becomes a decision. Do you want to live or don't you?
Yep.
Absolutely.
And to me, and I write about this in my book, once you choose life, then it's pretty easy because then you write down the decisions now that you have to abide by, or the choices you have to abide by now that you choose life. And it means I won't punish myself. I won't let others punish me. And I will, treat myself with love and kindness. And those are really hard. That's like the essence of.
They're the hardest things to do.
They're the hardest things to do. But if, and I say it to even today, I'll say it to myself. I'll have a bad day when I'm feeling really like I might go to a dark place, and I just close my eyes and I say, I choose life. Like, remember that, Melissa, you're choosing life. So you better make decisions today consistent with choosing life. And it changes me. I'm like, okay, then that means I'm going to have to eat today. I'm going to have to do all those things. And it's kind of like the heart over the mind. The mind is so powerful that ultimately we have to allow our heart to say, no, mind, I'm not going to. And I write about this again in my book. I was too weak. Like, I knew the demon was making me do things that were hurting me, that I didn't want to do, that were destroying my any ability to find pleasure. yet I didn't have the strength to say to that demon, like, no, you will not do this to me. Just the opposite. I was like, I talk about it as I was sitting in the back seat of my car where someone else, this demon was driving my car,
basically
careening out of control. And I was just like, I was trying to talk. No words came out. I was trying to stop. Nothing came out. It was just, I was watching helpless.
I think the easiest thing to do also is when you start, because I did this and I continue to do it on the podcast, is it's easy when, you get to the point too, where because like you said, it's a continuous struggle to some extent. You always got to be vigilant. And so it's easy for me to tell people like, or give them advice about what they should do in a situation, because I know the general idea of like, you need to have willingness and all of these things before you can actually go on recovery. And that I know that true recovery happens in here and here, not physically out here all the time. As far as true recovery, I know all these things, but it's like taking your own medicine is a lot harder than dishing it out. So I can dish out all the good words all the time, but to like keep yourself on that path is a lot harder than almost giving someone else that advice.
Yeah, I write a verse. I am so wise in others' eyes, but in my own a fool. Advice I give, I fail to live, and let emotion rule.
That's perfect. That's perfectly fitting. That was one thing I went through recently, was I took like kind of like a little quiz that like people think of me like this, and then you say likely, very likely, or I don't think of myself that way. And like one of them was like, I keep getting told by people that are like, man, you're so wise for a 24-year-old. And I'm like, no, I am not wise. I have garnered knowledge. It doesn't mean I'm using it well.
Yeah, but it does start that way.
It does start that way.
It really does. Like because you have to tell yourself the truths you need to believe, sometimes over and over and over, until they sink in. Yeah. So you're way ahead on the self-aware path. Doesn't mean, again, judgmental awareness is on the path to compassionate awareness. Yes. So judgmental awareness is where you are, it sounds like you're aware. Aware and conscious are like they're the most important pieces of the whole equation. But of course, because our egos do not want us to be happy, our egos want to tell us that we are alone and we will always be alone. You're always going to be fighting between your head and your heart. And that's the judgment that you'll give. But ultimately, once you really feel it in here and keep believing it, ultimately that ego will relax.
So I'm curious, have you employed any practices such as meditation?
That's what I was going to ask. Actually,
mindfulness is like a really broad term for all that stuff. There's very different things, but one thing I've been doing lately, and then I'll let you kind of dish out what you've been going on, is I just started on using something called Heart Math, which is basically an application you can use where you basically attach, it's kind of like a heart rate monitor, but the whole premise is you're doing a meditation for so many minutes, and then it tracks your heart rate. And the goal is to get to a really kind of flat line where you're not bouncing around all the time. And that's how, it's just a way to measure your actual level of presence in the moment, because I think it's easy to let your mind wander. So it's finding presence. So I was wondering, what have you been trying over the last years?
That's a great question. I mean, the whole idea of what are your lifelines for me became those things that helped keep me steadfast in the face of life's ups and downs. Because once I took the journey and realized I am more than just great, like actually I wasn't great at all. That was the biggest fallacy of my life. And that I was a whole spectrum of emotion, most of which were on the lower side. Then I was like, okay, terrific. Now I've accepted myself. How the heck do I get through each day? Because when you don't repress everything you're feeling and deny yourself, the ability to feel, then suddenly you're feeling these big emotions and they're really tough to handle. So I needed a practice to keep myself like safe and sane, but not cling to it. So that became this really incredible journey because I never really had a practice. I just achieved and performed and put one foot in front of the other and never thought about like self-care. So I think for me, it's a whole bunch of incredible things. And as you said, they all are around sensory engagement. Because when we are in our senses, grounded in our senses, we're here. And when we're in our head, we're not in our senses. Mm-hmm. So you can't be in your head and tasting, touching, hearing, seeing. What's the one I left out? Smelling at the same time. So I thought that was one of the most profound things I'd ever heard. I was like, wait a second. So when you're grounded in your senses, you're not in this horribly punishing prison of your head. And my own therapist was like, no. So I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing because I love engaging with my senses. So every day I try to take a walk outside in nature. And I'm a firm believer there is no bad weather. There's just bad clothing. Mm-hmm. So no matter how miserable it is, I just put on another layer and get outside because, in where we live, it's cold. So that always like makes me feel really like I'm connected to something bigger than my own lone self. I love to drink tea. It's a simple thing, but like tea for me represents coming home. It's like a warmth that I never felt. And like, it's like love. So when I make a cup of tea and I feel the hot water and I put in my tea leaves and make this really fragrant, concoction, it's a spiritual time almost. So I love to drink tea, listening to music. I truly feel my vibratory frequency raise when I listen to music. Like I can be at a low level and I listen to something that just puts me in this incredible flow and I feel myself lift. And that's really magical. And I played music my whole life. That listening I found is just as powerful. I never thought it would be. I thought when you stop actually playing, it's not great, but it is. And then most off creating for me, writing verses, writing anything, crafting, engaging in anything where I feel like I'm using my flow and going into that boundless expanse of imagination is incredible. So I try to engage in creative pursuits as much as I can. Those are a few.
I think that's actually a really good list. It's funny. I actually, a lot of those are like on my list of things. I basically on this road trip I just went on, I thought about all this stuff because I had time. We were just driving through nature, and it was really nice to like not have this social media really on all the time. And actually we lost service several times because we're driving through the boonies in Kansas and Colorado. But it was really nice. And we listened to all of these. We basically did album listening. So we listened to the full length albums, not specific songs. And there was really kind of like an uplifting, like you mentioned, vibration that you get from music, where it just brings you up. And the other thing was walking in nature is something that I've really wanted to start doing more.
I do that a lot. Yeah. I go out with my dogs and things. I do trail running with my dogs through woods and things. I feel that really helps my mental health.
It's true. There's this concept called entrainment. Do you know that concept?
I've heard of it, but I don't know a lot about it, to be honest.
So quantum physics says that we all have a vibrational frequency, everything, everything, including things that are inanimate and animate. And basically when your frequency is low and you go, let's say in nature, or you play a song where the frequency is higher, your frequency will actually entrain to meet that other frequency and you will resonate in tandem. So it's an actual law of physics, which is why we crave nature so much and we crave listening to music, and we crave some addictive things because, you know, they do allow the dopamine to flow and you sort of entrain, but it's truly biochemical, and something I think that we can do without an addiction to really move ourselves in our own power up. And I find that really fascinating. And I think my playlist is probably one of my most treasured possessions, because whenever I hear, and I don't know if you are both like this, but if I'm in the car, let's say, and a song comes on that meets my vibratory frequency, or it somehow does something to me, and no matter where I am, I'm like, what's that song? I got to add it to my playlist, and it becomes almost like, I get that. And I will stop the car, or if I'm with someone, I'm like, write it down, because I need to add it, because I want everything on my playlist to lift me in that same manner.
I must say that my guilty pleasure recently has been Miley Cyrus. I keep hearing her music and I've got to add them to my playlist. So funny. Probably shouldn't have admitted that though.
That's great though. It's whatever. And that's the thing that I find so fascinating is, like, you know, someone's trash is another person's treasure, right? Like the fact that some can find heavy metal like the most intoxicating thing, or classical music, or, you know, R&B, like, I always think it's incredible how we all are so different, yet so similar.
That's it, yeah.
So Tommy, I have to ask you, because I asked her, what have you been exploring recently? Is there anything new as far as like mental state stuff?
Nothing much really. I've been doing obviously a lot of EFT, which is like tapping. Basically, you'd obviously like tap in certain parts of your body. It kind of brings your body back to a kind of like calm state like you were talking about there. So I've been doing a lot of that. That's something I've been doing with clients and that as well, which I feel has really made a lot of difference. And basically breathing exercises, just kind of sitting for a few minutes a day, really being in your kind of own state and trying to kind of calm yourself down and really think about your thoughts and really try and kind of rationalize them. I feel that really, really helps.
Yeah, no. And what's beautiful about all of these things that we've discussed is it's all of it is applicable to so many different mental states and improving just mental well-being, because it doesn't matter what you're struggling with. It's all applicable, which I think is beautiful. So kind of as we're going out here, I want Melissa to talk about, I'd love to hear more about this kind of course you're setting up, as well as your book, and we'll put all of those things down in the description as well. Absolutely. So please let us know more about that.
Thank you. So, you know, Lifelines, the book, came out of this lifelong journey to find meaning for myself. And that took me nearly my whole life, and was so life-changing and giving me the reason to live that I wanted to write my story in all its ups and downs and highs and lows. So I put that down in this book called Lifelines, that really combines prose, all my journal writings, with my verses. There are nearly 1,000 verses in it, and these incredible photos of nature, which is one of my, I don't know, maybe my number one lifeline, because I create the most when I'm in nature too. So that is a book. But then we wanted to go further, because taking that inward journey and discovering and accepting myself for the first time so late in my life, like you were both so fortunate that you're in your 20s and doing this. I was in my late 40s when I started, which I found tragic, to be honest, because I feel like I wasted so many years denying who I was, that I became determined of two things. One, we all have the ability to turn our darkness into light, because I knew if I could do it, you know, having been so desperately low, I knew anybody could do it. And two, we will not find fulfillment and reach our full potential until we take the journey inward and really accept who we are in totality. So those two core tenets became the basis of our venture Lifelines, which I'm doing with my husband and life partner again, which is really exciting. And we are creating this community to show people that they are not alone, and also help to provide them with content and tools to allow them to turn their darkness into light and to embark on this journey inward for self-acceptance.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Man, that was really great talk. I really appreciate you coming on. So everybody, we'll have all of her stuff down in the description below. If you're not, go follow her on Instagram. That'll be in the description. She's
Absolutely.
really a real light in a lot of darkness. And I think right now, especially through this COVID thing, I think everyone, no matter what their background is, can use a little more light. So
I give you two so much credit for doing this so early on and making this one of your lifelines, part of your salvation, and your honesty and vulnerability is going to help so many people. So you're my heroes for doing this so early and admitting that you're not perfect. Like, that is the first step. So congratulations.
All right, YouTube, you heard it. 100,000 views. We deserve it. Let's go.
I'm ready.
But anyway, thank you again for being here. And thank you, Tommy. And we will see you all probably in the next one.
Thank you, Tommy. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks a lot.